Hi peeps. Let's see. So in the last video, I talked about the connections between my talking about nuclear families and women's spirituality. And that pretty much, we can kind of sum it up in saying that the so-called nuclear family, it's the one with the dominant male with a female and their offspring. And basically what happened is it became the model for the state, as in a sort of hierarchy, where at the top of the pile is a man who is benevolently ruling over his family, whether it's a single family or whether it's all the families of the country. And whether or not it's actually benevolent, as I've said before, is up to the individual. So the so-called nuclear family as a model for the state is problematic, number one. I think that's something that needs to be deliberately destabilized. I think we need more alternatives on what a healthy family could be, because that is something that is healthier for us as a species, as a community, and individually, as I said in the previous video. There's also the fact that the hegemonic family with the dominant male, the female, and the offspring has become God-endorsed in the United States, and that's problematic. That is troubling and problematic. There we go. Let's not combine the words. Troubling and problematic, because the Bible doesn't actually say that. Jesus is actually very specific about not engaging in adultery, but he doesn't say, in your family, you, the man, should be dominant. There are people that will point at, what verse is that? I think it's in Acts, or maybe it's in Timothy. I'll have to go double check. But there's some verse in there that's kind of hateful, honestly. And weird, because where it's placed is in Paul's letters. And Paul just got through saying earlier in the verses how there is no male or female in Christ. And he talks about greeting disciples in Christ, and he gives male and female names. So clearly they are both leaders. Both genders are present in the leadership, and Paul considers them legitimate. And then there's this little piece that's kind of shoved in the middle of the verses that basically says man is the head of woman, as Christ is the head of the church, and you shall not allow a woman to speak in church. And it's just this little hateful screed right there in the middle. And we know that that was inserted later, because we do have other copies of these letters from Paul, where it's in different sections, where it had been inserted in a different area. And frankly, I think one of the reasons that it was left in there was the Council of Nicaea were the ones that were saying this is actually legitimate and should remain in the Bible, and this over here is not legitimate and should be thrown out. And I think one of the reasons that they did it is they were getting some pressure from Constantine. Constantine was the first Roman emperor who converted to Christianity, and he wanted to have a holy text that could be referred to as the text about this new religion. Excuse me again. It would give the religion more legitimacy, if nothing else. You know, they could say, this is the authorized version of whatever, of their holy texts. So I think also, not only was he pressuring the Council of Nicaea, because he called them together, let's be honest here. He wasn't just going, oh, looky, let's put pressure on these people. He called together the people that he trusted to do this. And one of the things that he apparently was leaning on them a bit to do is to deauthorize the idea of women in leadership roles. And I can logically understand why he'd want to do this. I think it's a shame that he had to warp the religion to get the effect he wanted. These were women and men that were leading entire groups of women and men in a very egalitarian fashion. And I'm sure to Constantine, who was a good Roman, sorry about that. He was a good Roman first, even though he was also a Christian. And I'm sure to him it was kind of, if we allow this kind of thing, it's going to be madness, cannot let this go on, that kind of nonsense. So he was, as I said, probably putting pressure on the elders at the Council of Nicaea, which, big surprise, as far as we know, were all male. And so when they had this hateful little screed that they found in some of the writings, I like to think that a lot of the church fathers said, this is illegitimate, this should not be here. But majority probably said, no, this is what Constantine wants, or they were themselves insecure about their power. And they were like, no, women shouldn't lead. I'm sure it's legitimate, that kind of nonsense. And so that's how you ended up with this nasty little vicious bit of misogyny in the middle of Paul's writing, when Paul himself was somebody whose attitude was, oh yes, of course women can lead. And by the way, say hello to Sister, give a name here, at the beginning of his letters. So it was kind of sad, but to be fair, early Christianity, when I first started researching it, I was looking for the one true way, the actual thread, the real stuff. And what I found out was what we have now is actually much more homogeneous than what there was back then. As one person noted, something like 85% of the writings of that time are gone. They've just been destroyed. We can't find them. There is nothing. We have mention of them in other writings, but we cannot find, or maybe someday we will find. We got lucky with some of the other pieces of writing that we found, and that would be exciting, I know. But anyway, and I'm going to talk, if I haven't already, because I don't know where this is going to fall in the dates that I'm putting these up, but I want to talk about the Gospel of Mary too. That was fascinating. That was really interesting. But for another time. So, where was I? Okay, so that was why I was putting so much commentary on nuclear families. Wow, I really went off topic there. Let me go back to where I was. Oh, right. The other thing about nuclear families is it was a great means of keeping the returning GIs calm, productive, socialized. This may sound to you like I'm over-exaggerating a bit, but they've actually done studies about what happens in societies when you have a large group of young men who are not significantly connected to their community. And this is actually very destabilizing for most societies. The particular research I'm thinking of, the scientists were looking at how the Chinese were dealing with the fact that they have a significant disparity in how many women there are, the ratio of men to women, and that a large percentage of young men are never going to get married in these next generations, simply because there aren't enough women. And their society is very hidebound, and it cannot, will not entertain the possibility of, for example, one woman having two husbands. That would be a great way to bring more young men into community in a productive way. But that's I will be very, very surprised if that happens in China, you know. In the report, they actually refer to this type of young man as bare branches, as in that it's never going to leaf, it's never going to flower, because they'll never be able to find a partner. And some of the conclusions were kind of chilling. Basically, they said that the way that governments usually deal with situations like this is they figure out some way to get rid of the young men. And I mean specifically, those young men end up dying. It can be aggravating ethnic differences so that the young men fight it out amongst themselves, although that is a short-term goal, because if the government keeps pushing that, then people start getting upset because it feels like the government has lost control. Although it does get rid of the individualized young men problem, kind of a gruesome way. But anyway, other possibilities are public works, which are kind of dangerous. I cannot help but wonder if that's one of the reasons that many of the public works... Okay, no drinking soda before I start talking. It gives me the hiccups. But anyway, public works programs, let's see, when was that? I think it was right after the Great Depression, or was that near World War? I forget. But there was a series of major public works in the United States all at once, a whole bunch of them. I think Hoover Dam was built around that time. And I suspect a lot more young men died during those times than we actually realize. But that's one way to get rid of a whole bunch of them. The problem is, in the United States, I don't know that we have anything that's that dangerous that still needs to be done. God knows we still need to have a whole bunch of our roads upgraded, and our dams and our bridges and things like that. But we have a different work environment now. We have OSHA, for example, and OSHA says, don't get your people killed. You know, that's bad. Don't do that. What's another way that they dealt with it? Oh, here's the classic one. If you can't deal with the problem within your country of the bare branches, ship it elsewhere. And there's two ways that that's done. One of them is that you send a whole bunch of these young men out to another country or land as colonizers. Colonization was rough on everybody, and that included the actual colonizers. This is not to say that I'm saying, oh, the poor colonizers, how could we be so mean to them? But it is me saying that that was one way to get rid of a whole bunch of young men that you didn't want in your country anymore. And then the last way that I know of is to start a war. And frankly, it is really, really my hope that we can figure out a way to deal with our bare branches in the United States, because there's starting to be some here. The ratio of men to women is changing a bit, number one. And number two, women are less and less interested in men who will not meet them as peers. Women can take care of themselves. They are not in desperate need of a man, any man, to take care of them. And that's reflected in how we view masculinity in the United States too, which I should talk about in one of the later videos, because I think that's really interesting too. And frankly, I think women's spirituality would be very helpful to these men. But I also think that these men have been socialized to believe that anything that has even the least whiff of femininity about it is not masculine enough. And they sneer at anybody who would actually do that, which I find very weird, because those are the men that are the ones that are willing to not worry excessively about their masculinity, are the ones that are actually ending up with partners. Thank you so much for watching. It means the world to me. Smack that subscription button, and then please like and share. Drop me a request in the comments if you want more on this subject. And if you enjoyed my sharing my learnings with you, check out my Patreon. It's listed in the description below. You can find out more about my paintings there too. Let's bring more joy and compassion into the world.